One.
Hey everybody, this is Andrew Benjamin with the Devil's Lake Journal. We're talking with Ben Lesser, and he's going to tell us about his life. He's a Holocaust survivor, 95 years old, and we're absolutely honored to have him speak to us. Mr. Lesser, thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Benjamin. That's
Hmm.
my first name.
It's a good name. It's a good name for you,
Yeah,
if
good
I do
name.
say so myself. So for people that may not be familiar with your story, can you tell us where were you born and yeah, where you're originally from?
I was born in Krakow, Poland,
And
and
sorry, go ahead.
it was a beautiful city in Krakow, and we had a nice apartment that we lived in a building, and it was I don't know if you can see it. If I'll show you the pictures. Um, this apartment house building we lived in Krakow. You see it?
Hmm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can see it.
One early in the morning, the whole building started to shake and rattle. So I ran to the window and I saw tanks were rolling down the street, and following the tanks, there were Wehrmacht, and every few steps, a soldier they were half tracks also running with soldiers, and every few steps, a soldier would jump out of the half track, get on the sidewalk. This is how they occupied the city. There was no fighting. But on the fifth day of occupation, we found out what Nazi brutality was all about. A truck pulls up to the building early in the morning, and they were banging on the building, a truck full of soldiers. And the super came running out with his shirt tail hanging out. He said, "Well, what's going on?" All they wanted to know is where the Jewish people lived. And he was quick to oblige. He showed our apartment and our neighbor's apartment, another Jewish couple who had two daughters, a little younger than I, and the mother gave birth to an infant little boy 2 months earlier. They came crashing down the door, pistol whipping us. We were still in bed, 5 a.m. In their hands, they had sacks, open sacks, and they were screaming to throw in all our valuables, money, gold, silver, anything they can find of value. They threw into that sack. And they're beating up my father to open up his safe. While my father's trying to open the safe, we hear this terrible screaming from our neighbor's apartment. My sister Lola and I ran through the kitchen door into their kitchen door, and this is what we saw. This monster was holding the infant little boy, 2-month-old infant, by its legs and swinging it and yelling to the parents, "Make him shut up." The parents and the daughters were screaming, our baby, don't hurt our baby," with this smile on his face. You can see he was enjoying what he was doing. He smashes the baby's head into the doorpost, killing it instantly. All of us jumped on him, but the other soldiers heard something was going on. They came running in. They pistol whipped us. They pulled us off him. And they were a little shocked themselves to see what he did. So they said, "Come on, Hans, let's leave." They threw all their valuables into a sack and threw the sack into the truck, and they took off. That was only the 5th day of the occupation of Krakow. But after that, their new ordinances came out day and night, day and night. Jewish people could no longer, they had a curfew from 7 to 7 in the morning. You couldn't be on the street. And we had to wear a Star of David. All new ordinances. We couldn't travel there. We couldn't travel on a train. We couldn't travel on a bus. We couldn't leave the city. Well, one new ordinance came out that anybody living in Krakow may no longer reside in Krakow. If you wanted to stay in Krakow, you had to go inside the ghetto. Andrew, I hope you know what a ghetto is.
Mm-hmm. I do. I do.
Terrible place. But most of the people from Krakow went into the ghetto. My father's family, numbering over 200, they all went in the ghetto. My father was preparing to go into the ghetto when a young man by the name of Michael Lieber walks up to him. He says, "Mr. Lesser, you know how I feel about Lola, your daughter Lola. I'm in love with her, and someday I'd love to marry her. Do me a favor, come to the same communities that my family and I are moving to." Well, my father gave him a choice to go into the ghetto or to Neapolomice. He chose Neapolomice. And while my father is packing, helping to pack the wagon to leave for Neapolomice, we found out that my father had 1,000 American dollars that he saved up for a rainy day. He took a book, a religious book, and he pasted the money between the pages, and he put it in a sack full of big books. And we're now leaving Krakow. We're on our way. I didn't tell you, my father's business was wine and syrup. He had the wine and syrup manufacturing. He also had chocolate factory. He was the first chocolate factory to manufacture chocolate-covered wafers, something like Kit Kat. Only they were the shape of little animals, rabbits, bears, and tinfoil on it. Every time my father would come home, us kids would search his pockets. He made sure to have some goodies in there. But everything was confiscated. Everything was taken away. And now we found out my father had 1,000 American dollars. He put it in a book, in a sack full of books, and we're leaving Krakow. An hour out of the city, we're being stopped. Halt! 2 husky Nazis jump on the wagon. The first thing they wanted to know, do we have any Jewish literature, books? And they saw a sack full of books. They picked it up and heaved it on the side of the road. My sister Lola spoke a beautiful German. She walks up to him and she says, "Look, my father is a writer. He wrote his autobiography. Let him keep this one book." He looked at her, maybe he liked the way she spoke German. He says, "Okay, we'll give you 5 minutes if we can find it." The whole family was climbing on a mountain of books and sliding down All these books look alike, black or brown, leather bound. After 5 minutes, he chased us away. My father is now leaving penniless with a family of 6. We were a family of 7. But my oldest sister, when the war broke out, was in Munkacs. Munkacs was in Hungary. She was with her grandparents of my mother's side of the family. And the war broke out. She was caught there, which was good because Munkacs was in Hungary. It was a free country. Can I have some water, please? Anyway, what happened is that we arrived at this place. Excuse me. You see this picture?
Yes.
This is the house that Michel Lieber, my future brother-in-law, rented for us. One half was an apple orchard farmer. The other half was for us. And between the two of us, there was an oven, a baking oven. People used to bake their own bread. My father arrived with the family there, and Michael heard what happened to my father. He doesn't have a penny to his name. He went out and he bought my father 100 pounds of flour. He brought them to the house, figuring my father will be able to bake bread to feed the family. When my father saw the flour, his face lit up. Instead of baking bread to feed the family, he started to bake pretzels. Why pretzels? All you need for pretzels is flour, water, and salt. And those ingredients he had. Then he took the pretzels to the neighboring bars and offered it for sale. It was a novelty. They started to buy the pretzels. And this is how my father became a little baker in that community. He baked cakes and cookies and pretzels and mandelbread, all kind of goodies. We have no idea how he knew how to do that. And this was going on for about a year. And meanwhile, my sister Lola and Michael get married. When they got married, well, I want to show you some pictures. Yeah. They got married and all right, I don't know where it is right now. They got married. Okay, I didn't show you. This is my family. I still have an older brother, sister. Everybody in this picture, my father, my mother, my 2 brothers, and my sister, Goldie, were all slaughtered by the Nazis. No one survived. I didn't tell you that. And now we are looking. Anyway, 5 members of our family were all killed. Only Sister Lola and I survived the war. And after Lola and Michael got married, she moved into a duplex. The owner of the duplex was the mayor of that community. One day he comes home, he says, Michael, Lola, save yourselves. I heard the rumor there's going to be a raid against the Jewish people tonight or tomorrow night. When Michael heard it, he went out and he hired a wagon with a driver, and we snuck out in the middle of the night. The only place we can go to is a city called Bochnia. Bochnia had a ghetto. That meant we had to go inside the ghetto. Bochnia ghetto had a very bad reputation. Every so often, 2 or 3 dump trucks would come into the ghetto, and the soldiers would go from house to house and pull out the children from their beds and throw them into this dump truck. You can just imagine the mothers running behind these trucks and screaming for their children. But these cultured people had machine guns at the end of each truck, and they would mow down the parents running behind the truck. That resonated throughout Europe. Stay away from Bochnia Ghetto because of these atrocities. But we had no choice. And it's a good thing we did leave Neapolomitsa, because that night, later that night, they went from house to house and pulled out all the Jewish people, threw them into trucks, and took them to the forest. The men were given shovels to dig a ditch, and then everyone was shot. How do we know this? My sister Lola and I survived the war. We went back to Neapolomitsa after the war to find out what happened to all the people. The farmers were telling us as they went to the forest to pick mushrooms and berries to sell in the market in the morning, they saw those trucks pull in, and they saw everything that was happening. They said the ground was moving for 3 days afterwards. They didn't care if they killed you or they buried you alive. Excuse me. Okay. We're now in Bochnia Ghetto, and the driver unloads us in the middle of a street. After an hour or two, Michael sees a school buddy that he went to school with, who was wearing a uniform. He was a Jewish policeman inside the ghetto. They had no weapons, but all they had was a baton on the side of their, that's all they had. And his name was Farber. Farber says to Michael, what are you doing here? And Michael tells him the story about Neapolomitsa. He had to leave. This Jewish policeman says to Michael, don't worry, I'll find you a place to live. He took Michael, Lola, his parents and sisters to a house And he took my father, my mother, myself, and my little brother, the four of us, to another house, one room. And there were 8 other people inside that room. So now we were 12 in one room. No beds, all we had is straw on the ground and blankets on top of the straw. There were blankets hanging from the ceiling, separating each family. And this is everybody inside the ghetto had to work. My job, I was about 12 and a half years old. My job was working in a uniform factory. I was sewing on buttons on uniforms. It was easy work, but it was 13 hours a day, very little sleep and very little food. This lasted about a year and a half. And one day, Farber, that friendly Jewish policeman, goes to Michael and Lola. He says, Michael, Lola, save yourself. I heard the rumor there's going to be a raid against the Jewish people tonight or tomorrow night inside the ghetto. Well, uh, when Michael heard that, he ran to us and he told us about it, to my father and mother. That's when we found out that our hiding place, our bunker, was a piece of furniture, ornate furniture, where you hang your coats and jackets. You open the door, you push the clothing apart, the back panel would slide apart, and there was a hole in the wall, and there was room for the 12 of us to hide inside that hole between the two walls. Lucky for us, the outside of the walls were connected, so they couldn't see us. But the roof was open and was snowing, it was cold. And the 12 of us were standing there, shaking, shivering, and we heard shootings, dogs barking, screaming. We heard the dogs are tearing apart our neighbors. Towards morning, it got quiet. When it got quiet, we dared to come out. When we came out, we couldn't believe what our eyes are seeing. We saw our neighbors torn apart, laying in the snow. A mother with a little infant torn apart, laying in the snow. Some people were still partially alive. Others were torn apart, dead. And people going around in push carts and picking up these bodies and pieces of bodies and putting them into push carts and taking them to the ghetto square. And there they piled them up as high as they could. And these cultured people came with gasoline cans. They poured gasoline over these people, and they started the Bochnia Ghetto bonfire. A Bochnia Ghetto Square bonfire. Do I have to tell you what it was like? The smell, the ashes flying, screams and yelling. I knew that my sister Lola and Michael were hiding in a doghouse. Yes, you heard right, the doghouse. So I went to the doghouse, and I'll tell you in a minute what happened. I see my Michael and Lola crying, and they're telling me what happened. They were about to walk into the doghouse when another Jewish policeman walks up to Michael and Lola. He says, Michael, Lola, I know about your doghouse hiding place. Unless you take my sister and my mother along, I'm going to tell the authorities. Well, there's only room for 7, and now there were 9. So Michael and Lola walked away so the other 7 could go inside the doghouse. And while they're walking the street, this friendly Jewish policeman, Farber, sees them. He says, why aren't you hiding someplace, Michael? So Michael tells him about Morris Shillard and what happened. He says, don't worry, where my sister and her 2 children are hiding, there is room for you. Follow me. And he took them to a leather factory, a tannery. Above the tannery, there was a water tank. He says, my sister and her 2 children are inside that water tank. Climb up that step ladder, lower yourself down with a rope, and stay there all night until you hear my knock on the tank, which means the coast is clear, you can come out. Well, Lola and Michael are telling the story now. They lowered themselves into the tank. They saw his sister is standing knee-deep in water. His little girl waist-high in water. And the mother is holding an infant little boy asleep. And they're all shaking and shivering. Their little mouths, rats swimming in the water, nibbling at their feet. Lola picks up the little boy from the mother. Michael picked up the little girl from the floor. And they stood there all night shaking and shivering. And they heard the same thing we heard, shootings, dogs barking all night long. Towards morning, it got quiet. When it got quiet, they heard the tank, the knock on the tank. They knew it was time to come out. So they pulled themselves up. And came down the step ladder. Once they got some circulation back into their legs, the first thing they wanted to know, Lola and Michael wanted to know what happened to his parents and to his sister in the doghouse. So they went to the doghouse. And this is what they found. You see the picture?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody in the doghouse is dead. Little Marika here, his 7-year-old sister, Lola made her a doll. She's still holding on to her doll. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, when Michael and Lola saw that, they started to cry, and Michael stopped Lola. You have to be very quiet because they may still be burning bodies. They're going to hear you. If they hear you, it's all over. So with a quelched cry, they knew what they had to do. You see, according to the Jewish religion, you're supposed to bury your family You're supposed to bury your family within a week or 2 weeks, or not later than a month if you can. So Michael went out and he found a rickety wheelbarrow. He put his family on the wheelbarrow. And they took him to the cemetery up the hill. At the cemetery, Michael found a shovel and he started to make a grave for the family. He put the family in the grave. And suddenly, Morris Schiller walks up to them. And he says, "It wasn't my fault. It wasn't my fault. My mother and my sister have also been killed. But," he says, "the graves that you put your family in, I want it for my mother and my sister. You're going to have to take your family out." And Lola started to cry. And he says, "Well, Lola, he has the power over us." They pulled the whole family out of the grave, put him back on the wheelbarrow, took him to another spot, and they started fresh. When they suddenly hear a Jeep coming up the hill, comes up the hill and stops at the gate of the cemetery. Two husky Nazis jump out from the Jeep and they come into the cemetery. They are yelling, "Morris Schiller, Morris Schiller." He says, "Jawohl, here I am." He walks up to them. They pull out the revolver and they shot him. See, this is what they did to people who have seen too much. They didn't want to leave any witnesses. So they shot him. Yeah, Lola and Michael, holding themselves, crying, went down the hill. And when they came down the hill, they saw people were going around with loudspeakers. Anyone left in the ghetto has to go register in the Judenrat, in the Jewish police station. If you didn't register, you will not receive rations, so you die. So my whole family went to register. To tell you now, Andrew, to tell you the story from this point on, how we were able to get out of the ghetto. And we took 55 people with us, our family plus 55 people. We're outside the ghetto. It's a long story. And I can only tell you, read my book. Anyone interested, please read my book because it's too long of a story. I'm going to skip it just to tell you we are now outside the ghetto. And Michael befriends a truck driver outside the ghetto who was hauling coal. And he asked him if he would convert his truck into a double-decker, coal on top, and between the coal and the chassis, there is room for 10 people to hide. And he is going to be paid a lot. He agreed, and he converted his truck to a double-decker, and he came. Now, the first group of 10 people, there was one family who paid our way. It was very expensive to smuggle out, but they would only pay 2 of us on each truck with 8 of their people. So sure enough, the first one to go were 8 of that family, plus Lola and Michael. Why did they go first? Because you couldn't always trust these drivers. They would take your money up front, then they would turn you into the Gestapo, and they got ransom money for turning in Jewish people trying to escape. So they went first. And if the truck driver comes back with the right password, then you can trust. Andrew, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
And you see me okay?
Yep.
Good. Excuse me. See that picture?
Mm-hmm.
That was a coal truck, the double-decker, coal on top. Anyway, the second truckload was 8 people, and 2 from my family. My father, mother insisted that I and my little brother Tuli go next. All I remember, we went into this truck like being entombed, laying on our side, facing each other, my little brother and I. It was so tight, 5 and 5. Unbelievable. 2 hours out of the city of Bochnia, we're being stopped. Halt! And we see through the cracks of the trucks, we see soldiers with rifles, and they're talking to the driver. And we didn't hear what they said, but then the truck started to move. We felt relieved. They're letting us go, until we saw that on the step next to the driver, there is a soldier with a rifle. And now we hear soldiers walking on top of the coal. 2 hours they were with us. We were sure they're taking us someplace to get shot. The truck stops, and all we hear is Dankeschön, Dankeschön. They were hitchhiking. They had no idea there were 10 Jewish people hiding under their feet. Talk about miracles. Anyway, 2 hours later, we arrive at the forest. It was nighttime. The truck unloads us, and he says to us, walk into the forest. About 300 yards up the hill, you'll find the tool shed. The smuggler is inside the tool shed waiting for you. And sure enough, we came in the tool shed, and the smuggler was a what do you call it? A forest ranger. He was in a uniform. He was a forest ranger. He was the smuggler. He takes us in the middle of the forest. He tells us to lay down quietly and look up. We look up, we see soldiers with their rifles and dogs walking back and forth, and barbed wire up there. That was the borderline between Czechoslovakia and Poland. He told us at 3 o'clock, these soldiers will come down and they'll meet fresh soldiers down the bottom of the hill. They'll have a little ceremony, and the other soldiers will come up. It's about 5 or 10 minutes times that we can cross the border. Excuse me. Sure enough, 3 o'clock, they walked down. And once they were out of sight, we shimmied our way up to the borderline. And we came to the borderline. The smuggler would pick up the barbed wire and told us to go on the other side. But he says, be careful. The other side of the wire, there is a big ravine. And if you're not careful and you tumble, it's all over. They're going to hear you. Sit down at the edge of the mountain, hold hands, and slide down quietly, which is what we did. We sat down and we slid down, and then we came to a plateau. It was pitch black. You couldn't see anything. I asked my brother, are you okay? He says, yes, I'm okay. When suddenly somebody taps me on my shoulder. I jump out of my skin. Oh, in the middle of nowhere. He says, Beinish? No one called me Beinish unless it's a member of the family, the immediate members. He says, I'm your Uncle Bela, your mother's brother. I came here. I says, how did you know where to find us here in the middle of nowhere? He says, when Lola and Michael went through 2 days earlier, they contacted us and they told us exactly where you're going to come down. So I waited here for you. Andrew, to tell you how we still had to cross another border. We had to cross from Czechoslovakia to Hungary. It's too long of a story. It's much too long of a story. All I can tell you, if you want to know what happened, buy my book. And when you buy my book, only buy it from us, because if you buy it on the internet, it's a forgery. It's not our book. They forged it. So be sure you call us. On our website, it's all in the book. Contact zachorfoundation.org, O-R-G, and you can order the book. I will personalize it for you and send it to you. But if you buy it on the internet, it's a forgery. Okay, where were we? That's a long story, but we are now in Budapest in Hungary. How we crossed the border is too long of a story, but we're now in Budapest and we meet Michael and Lola. We have a good meal together, and I had to go to the police station to be legalized in Hungary. So I went to the police station, my little brother, they put us in a jail cell. An hour later, my uncle comes down with a policeman. They opened up and they let us out. He became our guardian. He was vouching for us. We were minors. So he became our guardian, but now we were legal in Hungary. And we boarded the train, and we are now going to Munkacs. Munkacs is where my mother's family are. And Munkacs is where my sister is waiting for me. Sister Goldie is waiting. We arrived at Munkacs the next morning. the whole family. It was a beautiful reunion. And one uncle asked me to stay in his house. He was a wealthy man. He had a store where he was selling yardage goods for clothing, men's suits and dresses. And he was very wealthy. So I told him, Uncle, if the Nazis ever come into Hungary, they're going to take all your valuables. It would make a lot of sense if you convert some of your valuables into diamonds so we can hide it on our body. He listened to us. One day he comes home with boxes full of shoes, a pair of shoes for every member of the family, beautiful black shoes. He says, know that in the heels of the shoes, there are diamonds. Use it only in a life-threatening situation. He gave every member of the family a pair of shoes with diamonds. About 5 months later, the Nazis march into Hungary like their invited guests. My father and mother were supposed to come out in the third truck. One of the farmers in one of the houses saw what was going on. They called the Gestapo. They pulled everybody out of the truck, all 10 people, plus the driver, all 11, they put against the wall, and everyone was shot. That's when I found out my father and mother were shot. And my oldest brother was put in a concentration camp in Plaszow. He was involved in now smuggling us out of the ghetto. They found out. And there was also a commandant of Bochnia who helped us get out of the ghetto. They executed him. They killed him. It's a nice story, but it's all in my book. All in my book. Anyway, the Nazis march in, and they knew every Jewish person, where they live, their addresses, their education, their business, everything. How come they didn't have computers in those days? IBM had punch cards. They would sell these punch cards to anyone who would pay the price. IBM doesn't deny it. They say they had no idea for what purpose they're going to use those punch cards. And this is what they told us. Germany needs workers. All the able-bodied men and women will be working in Germany. The children will be schooled, older people will be cared for. Bring along all your valuables that you can carry and leave everything else behind. Anyone found hiding will be shot. And people believed it. And they started to go to the train. Yeah. I can't find it now. All right, I can't find it right now. They started to go to the train and they loaded us 82 cattle car. And while we're waiting to get loaded into the cattle car, I see two men with a stretcher. They walk up and they put down the stretcher right by my feet. And I looked as a woman I couldn't recognize, bloody black and blue. And I look at her, it's my sister Goldie, beautiful Goldie. I didn't recognize her, all bloodied. What happened to you? She says she tried to escape. She went as far as the railroad station. A Hungarian gendarme saw her who went to school with her. He recognized her and he turned her into the SS. They beat her to a pulp. And now they're yelling for us to go into the train. 82 cattle car wouldn't be as bad if it weren't for the fact that everybody had a bundle. Now it was so tight that if you wanted to sit down, someone had to stand up. It was terrible. Are you still with me?
Hmm?
How about it? Still have time?
Oh yes, I got time. I got time. You can continue.
You made it time. Good. So inside the cattle car, there were two buckets of water. Once the water was gone, there were no sanitary facilities, no toilets. 80 people, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, no toilets. So they started to use the buckets. Pretty soon those buckets were overflowing. They were filled up. Can you imagine what it was like? Human waste on the bottom of the floor, all of our shoes. And some people were sitting in the human waste. And now we arrive at a place called Auschwitz. Auschwitz was Polish for Auschwitz. After 3 days and 3 nights, it was still nighttime. The train didn't stop at the station, but it moved a few hundred yards away. It went into sight, and inside we see a gate, and above the gate it says, Arbeit macht frei. Labor gives you freedom. That was the gate of Auschwitz. We're in Auschwitz, but we don't know where Auschwitz. We never heard of an Auschwitz. The train started to move out of the gate, and it moved for another 300, I'm sorry, about 3 kilometers. A place called Birkenau. Birkenau was part of Auschwitz. Birkenau, where most of the killing was done in Birkenau. We arrived at Birkenau. They opened up the doors. They're screaming in all different languages. Don't pick anything up. Women and children to the right, men to the left. And we see dogs, but the Nazis yelling and they're shooting and don't ask. They're screaming to line up. Men and women to the right. I'm sorry, men to the right, women and children to the left. Well, I'm holding on to my sister Goldie, my little brother Tully, and we're just being pulled apart, never to see each other again. They went directly to the gas chambers. Who knew? But this was a strange place. It was still nighttime, and ashes were flying all over. Every time you made a step on the floor, it was like in snow. You left a footprint in ashes. Smell, a funny smell, and we see those chimneys with flames shooting out of them. We didn't know what it was. The man in front of me are saying, oh, those must be smelting factories. This is probably where we will be working, in a smelting factory. They didn't know, nobody. We didn't know that the footprints that we made in the ashes was footprints on our dear departed ones. We had no idea. But we see a doctor in a white frock, white gloves going like this, right, left, right, left, right, left. That was Dr. Mengele, the angel of death. He decided who should live, who should die with a flick of a finger. When I came close enough, I heard him ask a young man, kannst du 5 kilometers laufen? Can you run 5 kilometers, or would you rather go by truck? This young man says he had a bad knee. He would rather go by truck. Poor soul, not realizing that meant certain death. They sent him to the left. Who knew? We didn't know what that meant. But it didn't make sense to me. Why would he ask such a question? Why would he ask such a question? When I see the barracks are right here, I figured he's testing us to see if we're strong enough to work. And sure enough, I go in front of him. I tell my uncle, my cousin, let me go first. I spoke German. I walk up, I was 15 and a half. I stretched myself out and I saluted him. And I said, 18 Jahre alt, gesund und arbeitsfähig. I'm 18 years old, I'm healthy and I can work. He asked me, kannst du 5 kilometers laufen? Can we run 5 kilometers? I said, jawohl. And he sent me to the left. My uncle, my cousin followed to the left. They marched us into a big auditorium and they told us to get undressed, get out of your shoes, walk up to this line of barbers. They're going to cut your hair all over, and then you'll go into the showers. Well, picture this. I get undressed. My uncle, who gave me the diamonds, my shoes, and his son, my cousin, got out of their shoes because we were ordered to get out. I refused to get out of my shoes. I have diamonds in them. So I refused. I go over naked with my black shoes on. to the line of barbers. They cut my hair all over. And I see the guards are going back and forth, looking at us. It looks like God blinded their eyes. They didn't say anything about my shoes. And they ordered us to go into the showers. I welcome with my shoes on. They gave us some other shoes with wooden soles and canvas on top. I went into those shoes and I put my beautiful black shoes with diamonds under my arm of my jacket, and I walked out. We came to the barracks. The Stubenälteste, the man in charge of the barrack, had an accent. It sounded like he's a Polish inmate, but he spoke in a broken German. This is what he told us. Ha! You Hungarian Jews. You think you're here on vacation? Think again. You see those chimneys, those ashes of their mothers, your fathers, your brothers, and your sisters. And if you don't behave and do exactly what you're told, this is how you're going to wind up ashes. I couldn't believe it. My little brother, my sister, ashes. And they chase us into a barrack. And they tell us to take a bunk. My cousin, I, and my uncle took an upper bunk. We lay down and we fell asleep. We were so tired. All three of us fell asleep. An hour later, my cousin kicks me, hit his arm. Wake up, Ben. What's going on? Listen. And I hear a chanting, a crying, or a screaming. I can't tell. And then he says, look, one side of the barrack, there was a board missing inside the wall, and we see flames shooting out, big flames. What is it? He says, I don't know. But I said, I'll find out. And I go to the Stubenälteste, the man in charge of the barrack, and I speak to him in Polish. Przepraszam bardzo, excuse me, sir. And when he heard Polish, his face lit up. He was so happy to speak to me in Polish. He couldn't stop telling me what's going on in Auschwitz. He was telling me things I didn't want to hear. If I have enough time, I'll tell you some of it. He was telling me that those screams that I hear are children being thrown into fiery pits. There is a fiery pit, one block of one barrack behind us is a fiery pit. And he keeps telling me all these things. My God, how long it takes to kill a man in the gas chambers is a half an hour, but they didn't have a half hour to give you because the trains were coming in with new inmates all the time. So after 15 minutes, they saw everybody was laying on the ground. They would open the door, let it air out, and the Sonderkommando would come in, pull out the bodies, cut their hair, pull out their gold teeth, check their body, put them on gurneys, 5 to a gurney with a rope around it, and push it to the crematorium. But that was too slow for them now with these trains coming in. It's too slow. Now they were throwing these half-dead bodies into trucks. And on top of the half-dead bodies, they would throw children that they would not allow to go into the gas chambers. The whole story. I don't have time to tell you all that. But I didn't believe him. So I made a mistake. I snuck out of the barrack. It was nighttime. And I snuck out to the other barrack in front of us. And I see a truck with people pulling out the children, throwing them into fiery pits alive, screaming. That was the mistake I made because it couldn't leave my eyes. I saw it in front of me all the time. I told it to my cousin and my uncle. Anyway, what we went through for 2 weeks in Auschwitz is unbelievable. Every morning we had to stand in appel. An appel means they're going to count you, but they wanted us to stand naked, and we had to still stand naked, and they would look us over. If they thought your body was too weak, too skinny to work, they'd pull you out and send you to the gas chambers. That selection was every morning. After 2 weeks, they put us in trucks, and they took us to a labor camp called Dernau. Dernau was a rock quarry. As you dynamited the mountain, the boulders would come down. It was our job with sledgehammers to break these boulders into manageable pieces, throw them into mining carts, run it down the tracks to the grinding machine where they made gravel out of it, and then push those carts back up. That was real hard work. Real hard work. But I want to see if I can show you these pictures. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find some pictures to show you. I don't know where it is right now. Okay. So they came into this rock quarry. It was very hard labor. I didn't think that my uncle will survive the work that we had to do in this rock quarry. So I bribed the chef from the kitchen with my diamonds and my shoes to give my uncle a job in the kitchen. He took my diamonds and he gave my uncle a job in the kitchen. It got a little easier on us because my uncle could eat in the kitchen. Then he would share his ration with us. So it was a little easier. Well, every day when we came home from work, we had to line up in rows of 5 in the yard, and they would count us. The kitchen help, the Jewish kitchen help, had to come out and line up with us, and everybody was counted. And after they counted, they would dismiss us. We would go for our ration and into our barrack. One evening we come home after work, they count us, and the commandant comes down with his Fräulein, with his girlfriend. He says, I'm going to show these Schweinhund a lesson they'll never forget. He's going to show these pig dogs a lesson they'll never forget. What happened? 3 inmates escaped. And because of this, he orders his henchmen to pull out every 10th person in line to receive 25 lashes. As they're counting every 10th person, pulling them out, I can see my uncle who is in front of me is going to be 10. So I push him behind me and I took his place. I became a number 10. They took us number 10 in the middle of the yard. They brought down 2 bundles of stakes, hardwood stakes, about 2 feet long, 2.5 feet long. And I sawhorse. Do you know what a sawhorse is?
A sawhorse? No,
Yeah.
no, I don't know.
Well, 2 sawhorses. Let's see if I can find a picture of it. I'm sorry. I don't see a picture of it handy. It's someplace. Anyway, it's 2 sawhorses, you put a log of wood to cut it. It's like a tripod. It has 4 legs and a 2x4 on top. And you take 2 of those, you put a log of wood to cut it. You know what it is now?
Okay, I think I'm familiar. I know what you're
So
talking
they
about
put a sawhorse there. And this is what they ordered us to do. Stand in front of the sawhorse, tiptoe, bend over, but your stomach cannot touch the 2x4 on top. There has to be room for a hand between the 2x4 and your stomach. Your heels cannot touch the ground. One man is pulling your trousers and the other one starts to hit. That's a sawhorse. You see it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So this is what they did. And I was number 4. The first one went up to the sawhorse, tiptoed, bent over without touching the 2x4, but he miscounted and he touched the 2x4. His heel touched the ground. Start again and again. Finally, he fell apart and he falls. When he falls, the commandant goes over to him, gives him a kick in the face. Stand up. He couldn't. So the commandant pulls out the revolver and shoots him right in the temple. His girlfriend walks up to the commandant and gives him a hug and a kiss, like he just performed the heroic act. He killed the man. I was number 4, remember. Number 2, the same way. He miscounted, he touched the ground. Don't ask, he fell. The minute he fell, the commandant kicks him in the face. Get up. He couldn't. He shoots him. We have 2 dead bodies. Number 3 goes up. Number 3 was a little younger. And he too miscounted, touched the ground. He couldn't stand it. He touched the 2x4. He yells out, "Please have mercy on me. Do not kill me." So the commandant says, "Then stand up, come over here and face me." The poor guy stands up, makes 4 steps, and his knees gave out, and he falls. The minute he falls, the commandant goes over, kicks him in the face. He couldn't get up. He shoots him. We have 3 dead bodies. Ben Lesser is next in line. What can I tell you? I remember walking up to that sawhorse, tiptoeing, bending over, and saying to myself, "Ben, this is it. If you want to live another 10 minutes, you better do exactly what they told you. No ifs or buts, exactly." I don't know how it happened. I tiptoe, I bend over without touching, and I'm in the midair, and one man is pulling my trousers tight, and the other one hits, and I had to count out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10. Finally, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 25. I made it. You can hear a pin drop in the whole camp. No one believed that anyone could survive this. The man who was pulling my trousers tight says to me in Yiddish, says, "Go over and thank the commandant." So I stand up. Blood is running down my legs. I walk over to him, salute him, say, "Danke schön, Herr Kommandant." "Thank you, Herr Kommandant." When he hears that, he puts his hand on my shirt collar, twists me around, facing the number 10s who are still to be beaten. He says, "Now I told you could be done. If you do it like this, Junge, you have nothing to worry about." I was probably the youngest in the camp. I don't know how I survived this. God was with me and watched over me. That's the only answer. He wanted me to survive. And while this is going on, there is a commotion at the gate. They caught those 3 inmates who escaped. They were pulling them in. You couldn't recognize them, bloodied. As they come in, when the commandant saw that, just like a child throws away a toy sometimes, the commandant told all of us number 10s to go back to our original lines. And he tells his henchmen to bring down a portable gallows, and we all had to stand there and watch while they were hanging, each one individual. I'll never forget the 3rd one. They put the noose around him, and he yelled out, "Shema Yisrael." That's a Jewish prayer. Only 6 words before you die. They wouldn't let him complete it. They kicked the stool out from under him. They wouldn't let him complete Adonai Echad, God is one. And then they dismissed us like nothing ever happened. We went for our rations. And for weeks, I could not lay on my back. I had to lay on my stomach because of these welts that I had. Well, one night we hear cannon fire, like the front was closing in. That morning when we reported to work, there was a loudspeaker saying, "No one is working today. Line up rows of 5 and march out. The camp is being evacuated." We couldn't say goodbye to our uncle. He was already in the kitchen working. We never saw him again. Never saw him again. And now we are lined up in rows of 5 and marched us out. That's called the Death March. Because if you could not keep up pace with the soldiers, they simply shot you. And all day long you heard pop, pop, pop. Soldiers were being shot day and night, day and night. Well, what can I tell you? I'm trying to find some pictures. I know I had them. I know I had them. You see that picture with all those people?
Mm-hmm.
Those were the wedding guests on Lola in the yard. Out of all these people, only 3 of us survived. Myself, I am, no, I'm here. Myself and Lola and Michael. Lola and Michael, they're the only survivors. Now, this is where I am, myself. No, that's me, the third one. The third one is me. That's the only picture we have when I was 12 years old. My little brother is leaning against my mother. None of these people survived, only the 3 of us. This piece of furniture was the one where the 12 of us were hiding in the ghetto. 12 of us, you open the door, you push the clothing apart, there was the panel would slide apart. There was a hole in the wall. Imagine. And when we came out, we saw the doors were open, the clothing were pushed to the side. They were looking in there, but they didn't know about the panel. It was a miracle. It was a miracle. I'm trying to find what was I going to show you. All right, I can't find it. Anyway, you had to march to keep pace. In my book, I write that I marched 3 or 4 weeks. I didn't know how long I marched. I really marched 7 weeks. I had a German professor contact us. He read my book. He says, Mr. Lesser made 2 mistakes. One, he said that he only marched 3 weeks. Mr. Lesser marched 7 weeks, 460 kilometers from Birkenau to Buchenwald, from Dürnau to Buchenwald, 460 kilometers. And he knows that's a story in itself, but I don't have the time to tell you what that. But right now, where was I?
The marching to Buchenwald.
Yeah, we're marching. The last week of our march, my shoes fell apart. Now I was marching in snow, and I had to keep up with the soldiers. 7 weeks. Don't ask me how, but I survived it, and I came to Buchenwald. In Buchenwald, they put us into a barrack, and they fed us. They showered us. I mean, they told us to shower. We showered ours, and they gave us fresh clothes and fresh shoes. Next morning, we had to line up again, and they marched us out because Buchenwald was also being evacuated. A few hundred yards from the gates, we see cattle cars, and they lined us up 82 cattle car. 82 cattle car. Yeah, my anyway, I push in my cousin first, and I says, find a spot against the wall so we can rest our back against the wall. I remember going to Auschwitz and the cattle cars and people all around me. It was terrible. And he did that. He found a good spot. I went in and we both had a standing place. And then they closed the door. An hour later, they opened the door. An hour later, they opened the door and they threw in 80 loaves of bread, a bread for each person. Picture this. Those people that near the door were grabbing 3 or 4 breads. And I and my cousin were against the wall there. We had nothing. I had to get a bread. So I started to climb over the sitting inmates to get to the door to wrestle out the bread from somebody who has many. And while I'm climbing over the people, one of the inmates had a pocket knife. He stabs me. I feel a stab in my throat. My mouth is filling up with blood, but I can't stop. I have to get a bread. So I climb, and this man had a bunch of breads. I pull one away. He kicks me. I put it in my back pocket, and I come back to my cousin. He looks at me. He says, "Ben, what happened? You're bleeding." I put my finger here. It went right through my tongue. I had a big gash. It went right through my tongue. Anyway, I rationed out that one bread between me and my cousin, a piece, half a slice of an egg, half an egg size every midnight, so no one could see us. And in the morning, we were after 3 weeks, with this one bread, after 2 weeks, the bread disappeared. We had no more left. So we were in the train for another week, 3 weeks, with this one loaf of bread, no water. Out of the 7,000 people in the train, when we arrived to Dachau, only 18 walked out alive. Only 18 walked out alive. And I and my cousin were one of the 18s. My cousin, 2 days later, we are liberated. My cousin dies in my arm after liberation, on liberation. Anyway, if you want to ask questions, go ahead.
Well, yes. Well, one of the things that when we got contacted about you and your story is the rise of anti-Semitism.
What?
I don't know if it's how much of it is in the U.S., but there's a lot going on in Europe, particularly with a lot of cemeteries being defiled, destroyed, or other things. I'm curious to know, um, what do you think about the world right now and anti-Semitism that's going on?
I'm not happy. I'm very disturbed by the anti-Semitism that's going on. Remember, Hitler and the Nazis did not start with killing. It all started with hate. Hate propaganda, that's how it began. And hatred has to stop. Why hate? Love and hate are both contagious, so choose love. All I can tell you is the hatred has to stop. And this is what I'm doing. I'm speaking daily to millions of people all over the world on Zoom, telling them, stop the hatred. Because eventually the hater is going to be consumed by his own hate. It doesn't make any sense. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
One of the other things is that, when I was in school, high school, middle school, there were so many more Holocaust survivors. And now, 20, 25 years later, I'm 37 now. Um, so many have unfortunately passed away. Uh, we still have you, we have your book, we have your words. But what are other ways that people, young, what can they do to learn more
They
about?
should be educated. They should all know about the Holocaust. You know, the anti-Semites get on the internet and they tell them there was no Holocaust, and they spread the hatred. They have to be educated. Education is the answer.
What is your outlook on the future? Do you think that the world can get
The
better?
future is going to be rosy. I won't let it. Look, another Holocaust will never happen in the United States. We have a constitution, it will never happen. But hatred has to stop. Anti-Semitism has to stop. Anti-anybody has to stop. We're all God's creation. We have the same rights to exist as anybody else. We should be able to live side by side and appreciate our differences rather than hate them.
Um, One of the other questions I have is, so I mean, I know you said you credited God, he was looking over you,
Yes,
when you were getting
yes.
whipped, but I would also like to know physically, what was there any other entity or uh things or other that you credit to how you survived everything?
No, when we read my book, you'll see at least a dozen absolute miracles that happened to me, and I survived. So I asked myself the same question you're asking me. Why? This week, 3 days from now, I'll be 96. And I still feel strong enough to do what I'm doing. I say God needed a witness, and this is why he, he, he gave me my life and my health.
So when people after they see this, they get your book or they hear your story, what would you like them there's if there's one or two or three things they could come away with, what would you like them to come away with?
You know what? I don't have a single what thing away from my book because, as I said before, there are so many miracles, and every miracle I survived. I don't know how. So the only answer is God needed a witness, and this is why I started the Zachor Holocaust Remembrance Foundation, the foundation which which makes me speak. And I wrote a book, and we do a lot of things. We give out pins, Zachor pins. I'm trying to give out 6 million of them. Anyway, I have to excuse myself. I have to go to the restroom. So I don't know if
Well,
I'm gonna wait.
that's okay. But before you, we could end it here. But before you go, can you hold up your book one more time so that people can see the title, and all that?
The book,
Yes.
Living a Life That Matters, From Nazi Nightmare to American Dream.
And people can get it from your from the Sahor
Or
website.
website, and I'll mail it, and I'll autograph it. I'll do everything, but then you'll get the real book. The
Mhm.
others are forgeries.
Mm. And so everybody, I just want to say thank you so much, Ben, for talking to us. Really appreciate you telling us your story, and giving us your insight. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
See that picture?
Yes.
It's my wedding pictures. My wife and I, we were married 72 years. She passed 2 years ago. The most beautiful marriage ever. I don't ever remember having a quarrel with my wife. Never. We were so good to each other, so harmonized. Yeah, I'm blessed. Very blessed. Andrew, what can you tell me about you?
Oh, me? I don't know. What do you want to know? What would you like to know, sir?
Uh, who do you represent?
The Devil's Lake Journal. We're in Devil's Lake, North Dakota.
A journal from what city? Where?
Oh, Devil's Lake. Devil's Lake. We're in North Dakota.
North Dakota.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if they're teaching the Holocaust there, but if not, they should. In
Mm-hmm.
Nevada, this is the first year that we're teaching the Holocaust, and I had a lot to do with it, Nevada.
I hope. Well, hopefully they are. Hopefully they are teaching it at the schools here. We got high school,
All right.
elementary schools, and
Can
one
you
middle school.
send me whatever newspaper you're gonna have it in?
Yes, we're gonna have. We'll also be on YouTube and also on in our in newspaper article form as well. We're gonna have the unedited this interview up on the YouTube, and then an article about you
Please,
telling us a
please
story.
send me a copy. Okay.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right, Andrew. Be well.
I appreciate it, Benjamin. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much.